13 people have stayed at the isolation center for those experiencing homelessness.
Tonight, social distancing concerns on the streets of Winnipeg.
Before we have a ratio 4 infants per 1 adult. Infants, it means younger than 18 months.
And a Whitehorse daycare stays open as an essential service during the pandemic. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Federal leaders in Ottawa are cautiously optimistic about the COVID-19 trend, but one opposition leader says the Trudeau government could be doing more. Jimmy Pashagumskam reports.
The COVID-19 committee reiterated what they said Monday, that the virus is slowing. In March, cases were doubling every 3 days. Now, they're doubling every 10 days. But officials say things won't be back to normal until a vaccine is found. After this first wave of COVID-19, we will be living in what the committee has been calling the new normal.
We still have a considerable way to go, and we are going to be absolutely vigilant and fierce about not squandering the tremendous sacrifice that Canadians have made, and not squandering what that sacrifice has accomplished.
In preparing for the next wave of infections, the committee said a new portable test being developed will be useful in remote Indigenous communities. And this morning, opposition leader Andrew Scheer questioned why Canada hasn't approved new medications and products to fight COVID-19 sooner.
We have extremely talented doctors, researchers, and medical experts here in Canada. Instead of simply relying on the WHO, we should be at the forefront of this health crisis, offering other countries our expertise, not lagging behind because of red tape and overregulation.
Afterwards, the Prime Minister did, however, announce new testing supplies that Canada has developed.
Lumen Ultra from New Brunswick, with whom we signed a contract, is now ramping up production to supply enough COVID-19 test chemicals to meet the weekly demand in all provinces. And in the last few days, we received a new batch of swabs to make sure every province has the supplies they need to keep testing. Whether it's reagents or test kits, we are ensuring that Canada has the tools to fight this virus.
Trudeau also announced new measures in the Canadian Emergency Relief Fund that will qualify people who make less than $1,000 a month, seasonal workers, and those whose EI has run out since January 1st. The Prime Minister stressed again that just because the spread of COVID-19 is slowing down, now is not the time to relax measures, or else we face the possibility of a resurgence. Jamie Pashagumskam, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And Canada's Chief Public Health Officer does say that new data about the COVID-19 virus suggests that the spread is slowing. While Dr. Theresa Tam warned against immediately reconsidering public health measures, she says that the new numbers are cause for cautious optimism.
At this point, we still don't have all the answers, but there is some cause for cautious optimism coming from our epidemiological data. Because COVID-19 is very contagious, even a few cases can quickly multiply, resulting in a steeply rising epidemic curve. This type of increase is referred to as exponential growth, with case numbers doubling every few days. In late March, when the growth rate was the fastest, we saw case numbers doubling every 3 days. But in recent days, we've observed a doubling time of over 10 days. This means the epidemic is slowing down.
The Prime Minister has also cautioned against reopening Canada's economy too soon. There's concerns that restarting things too soon could lead to a second wave of the virus. People across the country and in almost every community are practicing social distancing, but one of the most vulnerable groups of people who don't have proper sanitation or even a home aren't. Daryl Stranger takes a look at the transient population in Winnipeg and how they're handling this pandemic.
The Manitoba government and the city of Winnipeg announced they're going to be getting tough on people that don't social distance.
Of course, we're concerned with any gatherings where people seem to either not be aware of or are ignoring sort of some of the protocols.
Winnipeg can now give a fine of up to $486 to individuals and about $2,500 for businesses who don't social distance. These fines are the final step in what is a multi-tiered process, which would first include verbal and written warnings and public education. Now, Winnipeg has a fairly high transient population with as many as 15,000 people, many of whom are not or cannot practice safe distancing. One person we spoke to said that they have much bigger issues to worry about than COVID-19. What's your biggest concern with the virus?
Dying of starvation or freezing in the streets of Winnipeg. Cordova is my least worries.
The Manitoba government is spending about $1.2 million to deal with the pandemic. For the homeless, they're adding 140 new shelter beds to support people affected by homelessness. Shared Health says isolation centers for those experiencing homelessness are open and in use.
13 people have stayed at the isolation center for those experiencing homelessness since opening last Thursday night. So currently 11 people are staying there as of Tuesday evening. We expect at the shelter that there'll be 39 rooms that will be open and in use by the end of this week.
For many who live on the streets, protecting themselves from COVID-19 is just not possible, and they worry. Just anything else on COVID that you're concerned about? Or
just mainly the virus, because I've got a very bad immune system, and I'm immune to anything. My immune system's down, so I can pick up anything.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A group that represents municipalities in northwestern Ontario has expressed its concerns to the province over the upcoming spring thaw and forest fire seasons. Municipalities that often host evacuees from northern First Nations say the COVID-19 crisis has them stretched too thin. Thunder Bay typically hosts hundreds of evacuees from northern First Nations due to flooding or forest fires, but the city was one of many that has laid off hundreds of employees and closed facilities normally used by evacuees. The Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association has suggested expanding additional host communities that can house military bases, both fixed or temporary, or setting up portable facilities in serviced provincial parks. Amnesty International and nearly 300 organizations and experts across Canada are urging the government leaders to keep a better eye on possible human rights violations as this fight against COVID-19 wages on. Endorsed by Indigenous leaders, academics, and former politicians, the letter asks for advisory roles for Indigenous knowledge keepers and for the formation of independent Indigenous-led committees that will report back to government. Urgent measures meant to ease the strain on First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. Officials are scrambling to detain Canada's largest outbreak of COVID-19 at a prison. The Mission Institute is located an hour drive from Vancouver, British Columbia. 6 staff members and 41 inmates have tested positive for COVID-19. 7 of those cases have been hospitalized. A mobile medical unit has been brought on site. The Union for Correctional Officers were not available for an interview, but they did state they are calling for masks for inmates and reduced movement of staff between posts. Claude Guimond, a former Saugeen First Nation school principal who pleaded guilty to 2 murders, was sentenced to life in prison today. Guimond pleaded guilty to the second-degree murders of Jody Brown and Stephen Cheverfees. A Winnipeg court heard that the vigilante killings were in response to drug dealing in Saugeen. Well, we need to take a break, but coming up, there's a crackdown on bootleggers profiting off a pandemic. First, here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast for the east and central parts of the country. Starting off on the east coast, we've got 4 and cloud for St. John, 6 and snow in Halifax. The Grand River -9 and snow in Nitchwack, sunshine and -11. Sept-Îles is 0 with mostly sunny skies, 2 and snow for Quebec City. Windsor 6 and some cloud, North Bay snow and 2 degrees. Sulikote -2 and snow, Kapuskasing same thing, -6 for Big Trout Lake. 0s for Thompson and Norway House and snow, -6 up in Churchill, snowy. 3 and snow for Winnipeg Brandon, +3 and mostly sunny skies. 5 and cloud for Swift Current, 1 for Yorkton with a mix of sun and cloud. Buffalo Narrows 6 degrees, sunny skies, 3 for Uranium City and Stony Rapids. Welcome come back. There has been a surge in bootlegging in north of 60 communities during this COVID-19 pandemic. Dene leaders in the Northwest Territories are pleading for the territorial government to hear their request to ration alcohol. Our reporter Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs has that story.
Liquor stores in the Northwest Territories are open for business, and so are the bootleggers. In recent weeks, large quantities of alcohol have been seized in Fort Providence, Fort Good Hope, and Fort Liard. This has leaders taking to social media, pleading with bootleggers and partygoers to stop.
Give your head a shake and look at how you're contributing to ongoing problems. I've been getting reports that in some communities, bootleggers are not only hiking up their prices, they're doing home delivery.
In the Gwich'in Settlement region, where Grand Chief Bobby Joe Greenland Morgan is, there's one liquor store for 4 communities. During COVID-19, a Mickey can go for as much as $120 in a remote community.
I would like to see them monitor more of how much alcohol is being sold. I know in other territories, such as the Yukon, if someone goes in and decides they're going to buy a case or 2 cases of alcohol, they need to, there's a form they fill out.
The issue of addictions in the North is nothing new. Greenland Morgan is advocating for an alcohol symposium with leaders across the NWT to take place this year.
The NWT, they need to make put more investment in the health and wellness and the healing recovery aspect for our people. And I think with this pandemic, I think it's a big eye-opener to territorial government.
On April 4th, Dene Nation put forth a motion for the territorial government to restrict alcohol sales and find funds to help people manage withdrawal. But Finance Minister Carolyn Wozenek told media government would not implement any territory-wide restriction on the purchase of alcohol.
We're monitoring what the usage is. We're looking at people's consumptions and trying to figure out a balance between restricting the abusive behaviors while not interfering with responsible consumption.
APTN asked Wozenek why the government was slow to respond to Dene Nation's request. She says there's a lot to consider, whether or not to restrict it by volume or dollar.
If there's a way to restrict alcohol such that it would discourage bootlegging, that's what would be a target for us. If it's a matter of restricting alcohol, but to a degree that pushes people to return more frequently, more often to liquor stores, to be out of their homes more frequently, then that's not accomplishing what is right now the primary goal, which is to ensure the healthcare system's capacity and to keep people at home.
Prior to the pandemic, the NWT had 15 communities that either had a ban or restriction on alcohol. Currently, 4 communities have applied for temporary prohibition. Charlotte Moritz-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Still in the north, some daycares in the Yukon are keeping their doors open during this pandemic, saying that childcare is an essential service. Chris McIntyre explains.
For essential workers with children during these times, childcare can be a lifeline. Ivan Skofenko is the owner and director of the Teddy Bear Daycare in Whitehorse. When new safe distance measures like limiting group size and working from home were put into place, Skofenko saw a 30% drop in attendance at his daycare.
Before we have a ratio 4 infants per 1 adult. Infants, it means younger than 18 months. And now it's only 2. And we didn't have infants these days, actually. And for toddlers, it's children from 18 to 3 years old. Normal ratio is 6 children per 1 adult. Now it's not more than 4. And the same ratio for preschoolers. It's not more than 4 children. However, we have normally 8 children per 1 adult.
Despite lower numbers of children, the Teddy Bear Daycare keeps running with the help of government funding, which enables the service to be provided to essential workers.
This funding should cover workers' wages, because certainly with this number of children we are not able to pay for this number of staff, and it should cover our bills, electricity and rent, and some other expenses related to program operation.
Although there's government funding for childcare, some providers have decided to close their doors over concerns of public safety. This leaves essential workers that are living in smaller communities like Dawson City with fewer options.
Or like if you built a time machine, what time would you go to?
Levi Aiken is 10 years old. While both of his parents work and with no daycares or programs available, Aiken uses this time to build memories with his brother.
We built a shelf, and I normally don't do that in school. It's actually the one back here. It's holding all of our school stuff. We had to like get the wood and screw it together, and I went through like cutting on a board, and we didn't have our dad to help us, so it was kind of hard, but Ryan knew how to use it from shop class.
The Yukon government has only outlined funding for 3 months and then will have to discuss their next course of action. In the meantime, the daycares that have remained open will continue to remain essential to Yukon's essential workers. Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Those Aiken's brothers should maybe consider going into shelving business while we're all in isolation. A woman in England, believed to be the country's oldest patient with COVID-19, has recovered from the virus. 106-year-old Connie Titchen was greeted with applause as she was discharged from a Birmingham hospital. She was born in 1913 and lived through 2 world wars. She says that she is very lucky to beat the virus and is looking forward to being with her family. She also would have been alive during the Spanish flu, which infected 1/3 of the world's population back in 1918 to 1920. And there was a man in Italy I read a couple weeks ago who was over 100 years old and has had both the Spanish flu and COVID-19, and he survived. So there's some hope from those elders. We have to take another break, but when we come back, APTN News turns 20 this week. We reminisced on In Focus this afternoon and have some highlights. And here's the rest of tomorrow's weather.
Off to northern Alberta, we've got 8 and sunshine for Fort Chip, 13 and sunny and high level. Edmonton 9 and sunshine, 8 for Calgary and Lethbridge, sunny skies. Tofino 16 and sunshine, same with Vancouver, 19 and sunny in Kamloops. Dease Lake 7 and rain, 15 and cloud for Fort Nelson. Whitehorse 7 and rain, Beaver Creek 9 and cloudy. Wrigley 7 and rain, Fort Simpson 10, mostly sunny skies. 5 and cloud for Fort McPherson, Palatech -2 and snow. Baker Lake -14 and sunshine, Repulse Bay -17 and snowing. Tallyoak -15 and sunny, Resolute 19 and clear, Clyde River -13 and snow.
Welcome back. This week, APTN National News celebrates its 20th anniversary. So today on In Focus, we took a trip down memory lane, looking back at those early days and talking to people who were there and the changes that they've seen.
I mean, like I said, I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I can tell you when we started working and covering news stories at APTN, I mean, monitoring mainstream news stories about Indigenous people in this region alone, in the Atlantic region, I could count maybe 20 to 30 stories that were covered, and that's the entire region. We're talking about Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick.
Yeah.
And from that, and since then, those stories have increased. I mean, I still keep track of the mainstream news stories that are being filed from this region, and it went from 30 a month up to 150 a month. That's incredible. And it's hard to keep up with that. And I kind of think that, APTN had something to do with that, because we were showing up at news conferences and people were wondering, well, who are these people? Yeah. And what story are they filing? But I also think it has a lot to do with Canadians' interest in Indigenous news.
Hi, we're the Squamish Nation, and you're watching APTN.
You're watching APTN, bringing you our lives, our voices.
We heard before the break Maureen Gugu talking about how she would have like 3 days to travel all over the place, gather a story, write the story, voice the story, get it vetted, ship it off on tape to get here to get edited for a Sunday show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and now
it's all FedExed, and now you can just
This is sort of what the scripts used to look like for
Oh,
the news.
turn it around so we can see the front of them. So you can see like this is.
And then all the print was, of course, in there.
Is that from the first show?
That's from a Summit of Americas that we did.
Okay.
One of the scripts. And but now, I mean, everything just comes on these, so it's totally different. I mean, you can have your script, story, everything on this, so it's total change.
Tungmasugutsi, takunakpusi, APTN, tungmasugtsiagitsi.
I'm not sure. I mean, like, the great thing about APTN, even from the get-go, like a lot of people started here, or who were here when I got here, and who have come since then, it's been a training grounds for a lot of people, and it's been fun and challenging at times, watching people grow and blossom into things. And sometimes people come and maybe they can't quite adapt, so it's difficult, and you see them struggle, and that's difficult because oftentimes, you know, one person's struggle in news can become your struggle. Like as a host, if the people that you're relying on aren't meeting their deadlines, it can make a new challenge for you, and it's the same technical.
It has those moments sometimes.
But I mean, you know, you take some of the good with the bad, and for the most part, it's been really good, and you kind of forget about some of the struggles you have, and you enjoy more of the successes that you've seen. So.
The Native Women's Resource Centre of Toronto is all about helping during these trying times, and a big part of that is keeping a positive mind. In addition to providing groceries to those in need and hosting ceremonies online, the organization is sharing daily affirmations to remind people of their personal power. Executive Director Pamela Hart explained why.
I think that they're important because this time right now is very unknown. It's very unfamiliar. We're all under different stressors, and we're all being forced to react to something that we've never been faced with before. And everyone has their own day-to-day different stress factors. And I think that to stay grounded, to manage what is unknown and what may be happening moving forward each day, it's important to take those moments.
And she shared today's affirmation with us, which reads, "I am sacred. I enjoy taking care of my mind, my body, and my spirit." Well, that is all the time I have for your news tonight. Check us out online if you missed anything, aptnnews.ca. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.